Nothing's scarier to me from a professional standpoint than being too comfortable. That gets really scary really quick. You have to be comfortable with uncomfortable. Getting comfortable and staying comfortable and just going with the status quo and just continuing on, that can lead to some tough times.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Thrive and Achieve with your host, Dr. Matt Markle. Thrive and Achieve is the only podcast where professionals help professionals to succeed in career and wealth. Now, here's your host, Dr. Matt Markle.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thrive and Achieve, where professionals help professionals thrive in their career and achieve financial success. Today, I am super excited to introduce Travis Griffith. Travis is an absolute rock star in the people and human resources profession. He's had leadership positions at Viacom, Turner Broadcasting System, and Azubu, which is a pioneer in the game streaming industry. And he was vice president of people and operations at Spartan Radar when I was president and then became chief executive officer. Travis truly understands people, culture, and the tricky business of human resources. He's absolutely the opposite of the compliance Nazi and brings creativity, compassion, and an incredible ability to get things done. Travis, welcome to Thrive and Achieve.
Matt, thank you so much for having me. I've been really excited about this since we got it booked. And to honor some of our past conversations, I had to wear my Dodger championship hat, my Dodger championship t-shirt. I remember texting you from the stadium. I think it was before the Dodgers won, even last year, as you were excited for your Cardinals season. I see I'm getting the Matt face that I'm so when he's disapproving of what I'm saying or thinks that I'm just, pulling something crazy out. But, I'm dressed to honor you, my good friend.
Thank you so much. That's great. Obviously, baseball is something that binds the two of us together.
Yes.
Although we have some difference in opinions on teams, but that is a great way for us to always have something in common, no matter how difficult the times are, because it is truly America's pastime.
100%. It's always good to talk baseball with you, buddy.
Exactly. So, Travis, I gave a little bit of the intro to you in the opening segment, but tell us a little bit more about your professional journey. What got you to where you are today?
So I started from the ground up. My very first corporate job at MTV Networks back in the late 90s was the receptionist. I was phone boy. If you remember the old David Spade's Saturday Night Live character of the receptionist going, and that was me, right? That was me. And as MTV was growing their Los Angeles presence, they didn't even have an HR department when they first started out there. And they finally got one, and they needed help hiring interns. And, I'm at the time just literally stuck at the front desk with my headset on. They're like, can you call these folks and can you make them an offer so we can get interns in? And I remember calling one young lady in particular to offer her an internship at MTV Networks. And it was it wasn't like in the facilities group or one of the non-sexy groups. It was in one of the real kind of fun ones that folks want. And she was, people say, oh, I had to pull over. I was laughing or crying so much. I heard her. She pulled over. She had tears of joy and thanked me over and over again because hey, at that time, if you get an internship at MTV, it's pretty cool. And that's what kind of got me into human resources. It was that call, just, giving interns there. It's like, hey, kid, here's your shot in entertainment, right? And that was the first piece that kind of drew me into it. Because I think most folks tend, from an HR as a profession, they tend to fall into it, right? And I just really enjoyed that piece of it. And I grew my career literally from there.
You get hooked, right? You get hooked on helping people become the best version of themselves while doing great things for whatever the company's mission is.
Exactly. And then, it's what's really great is if you can tie a personal interest that you have to where you work, right? Because if you're just naturally curious about things, about how that business works, you're gonna, you're gonna tend to do better. You're gonna tend to thrive. You're gonna be more involved. You're gonna care more about when you really care about the mission of what the company's doing, even if at the time it was music videos and dodgy reality TV shows, right? Not so much as it is that way anymore. But, if you have a personal interest in what the business it does, this makes it even more fun. And it is fun to give people their first shot. Like, hey, especially junior career. Here you go, kid. Where you go from here, it's all you.
Fantastic. So, Travis, you've had quite a bit of success in this profession. Was there a defining moment that kind of put you on the path to achieving that level of success? Something that basically is like, if I do this, or if I realize this, or if I talk to this person, it will, this is going to be gold. And whether you realized it then or realized that in hindsight.
I think what I really did is there's a few points in my career that I realized it in hindsight, and I look back on it going, if I had my brain now, and I've shared this story with you before, I believe, Matt. If I had my brain now, I would knock this out of the park. I would love to have another shot at it. But when I was starting, the one thing that I did to make myself invaluable to the company was I never said no to an opportunity. If they asked me, and I started MTV Networks as a receptionist, right? Then I moved my way up and I went into the facilities department. And then from there, it was kind of, I got away from HR and I didn't want to do that. So from there, I went over. Paramount Pictures had an opening for an HR assistant. So I moved from MTV to Paramount, still under the Viacom umbrella, right? And then from there, I worked my way up from assistant to recruiter to manager. And I got an opportunity to go back to MTV Networks to oversee the regional functions of Chicago, Detroit, and Atlanta. I was newly married, and I've never lived in Chicago before, but that's where the job was. And what I've kind of always done throughout my career is sometimes you have to make the tough decision, and you got to go where the job is, right? That can be, and not everyone has the ability to do that. But I was newly married at the time, no kids. And I went to Chicago. And from there, I got a call about a year and a half in, and they needed an HR director at CMT in Nashville. Trav, can you cover this? Yes. So Chicago to Nashville. I had my corporate apartment, and I commuted weekly, Chicago to Nashville. Found the HR director there, went back to Chicago. And I got another call and said, hey, Trav. Now, mind you, I was a manager at this time. Trav, we have a vice president of what was Spike TV going out on maternity leave. Can you go and fill in for the now vice president as a manager to New York? So I commuted O'Hare to LaGuardia, back and forth weekly. Two lovely airports to commute from, by the way. Everything is always easy and on time at both of those airports. But that's what got me my director role moving back when we came back to California. It was interesting. It was, I want to say 2007. And it was almost to the day I was sitting on the fifth floor directly above the reception desk that I first sat at way back when I started at MTV. Almost to the day from, about 7-8 years later. That's what it's always been is, never turn down an opportunity. If you can do it, never turn down an opportunity. And I've had exposure to great people and great leaders who I've taken things from that kind of form my own management style, right? I had great supervisors where I was like, wow, I really want to emulate this person. I really like how they do things. I've had other supervisors where it's like, wow, I would never say that to someone in a million years. I'm not going to do that, right? And that's kind of formed how I run my business and really have turned into, like you mentioned that, the opposite of the compliance Nazi, right? Because no one wants that. And all that does is stunt the business. But it's making those moves when opportunity presents itself, to not be scared, right? To not doubt, but hey, this is an opportunity that these things don't come along very often. You need to go for it regardless of whether you're comfortable with it or not.
That is such good advice. When I wrote Anti-Preneur and I was listing out the aspects of my manifesto, what are the secrets that I've used in my career, the take advantage of the big opportunities was in there. That was one of the 5 things that I shared, is like, how did I get to be where I am today? It wasn't just continuing to plod along, in the same city. You will have to take some risks. Actually, with every big opportunity that I've had, there were 2 aspects of it that came up. One was there's a fair amount of risk. You have to move to a new city, reinvent yourself, start in a position where you don't know anybody. And it also took a fair amount of work. But if you can put in the effort and tolerate the risk and the imposter syndrome and the being scared, then you can make these big opportunities be a stepping stone for you to be able to impact more, help more people, do better things for the vision of the company, whatever your goals are.
Yeah. And even ties back to like some financial freedom and financial success. It's really the same mindset of, well, boy, I really kind of want to go do this. This would be safer if I just want to go have fun with maybe this chunk of money. But actually, maybe if I do this instead, think long term, and maybe, delay that gratification, knowing your long term goal is just like your career. You're trying to grow your career, right? So you go and make those moves. This is the move I need to make. It's not the easiest move necessarily to make, but this is the move I need to make to be successful. And that's always served me well. And even in situations and roles that didn't work out, right? That didn't work out for me, or I didn't think that I was successful in, even though that happened, I was still able to take something away from it and learn something from it. The job that I am most thankful for is the job that at the time I absolutely hated and was what I thought I was my most unhappy. And I learned by having that job and going through those struggles, it gave me skills that I most definitely needed rounding out. Right. And now I am most thankful for that experience and that opportunity, and that I had that boss who was all over me, because it made me a better professional. It made me a better person as well, too. It helped me in my life to go through some of those struggles.
That's absolutely stellar advice. You have to go where you are, learn where you are, make the most out of every situation. I remember one time I was moved to one particular, reassigned to one particular role, and it was a tough time. I was getting my PhD at the time, and I had to, start this new job, and something. And there was some politics involved in it. There was just a series of like things that like made me mad. And at first I was kind of, I wasn't like leaning in hard, but then I realized like, oh my gosh, this is an absolutely fantastic opportunity. And the access it gave me and the people that I met, the number of 4-star generals, this was a defense thing, the number of 4-star generals that I met at the time was just fantastic. And I wouldn't have had that if I had stayed in the role that I thought I really wanted. I'd actually maxed out everything I was going to learn there. And by moving into this other thing, it opened up this whole other community. So just Travis, stellar advice there.
There's 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 nothing scarier to me from a professional standpoint than being too comfortable. That gets really scary really quick. Just in life and anything, you have to be comfortable with uncomfortable. That pushes you areas that usually that's your brain telling you need to go this way. Push yourself through that, right? Getting comfortable and staying comfortable and just going with the status quo and just continuing on, that can lead to some tough times.
100%. Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk about the workplace for a second. So, post-COVID and in this modified return to work, working in some places, not, some people pushing back in other areas, the weird economy that we're in, when we're taping this right now, the government is still in shutdown. So where do you see the workplace evolving, and what should employees of today expect from their companies?
Well, right now you have this battle because, COVID is everyone was working from home, and employees really like that. And now you have this pull in return to work, return to the office, RTO. You see it all over RTO initiatives on LinkedIn. And I think there's benefits to both. And I think it can't just be one way or the other. Where we're seeing real challenges is people returning to the office because they just, culture and collaboration and things like that. People built great cultures. People had great collaboration during COVID, but you have to work hard at it, right? Great leaders can build a great culture in a remote environment, but you have to balance both. It can't be, people think, you and I have had conversations about work-life balance. Think back to our days in that conference room talking work-life balance, right? Employees tend to think work-life balance, it's a scale and it's always on their side, right? I think what we have to do is someone doesn't have to lose for the other side to win, right? I think there can be a balance between what a company wants and what a company thinks best because, hey, guess what? They're paying you, right? And what works for you and your family, or just you and what you want to do. And I think instead of being, it has to be this way or this way, people just need to talk, and it needs to be a balance for what works. Personally, for me, as I've been consulting, I've been home more. It's fine. I personally would love like flexible scheduling for me and how my brain works. You'll get the best of me. And Matt, you remember you and I had meetings at 8 in the morning, and we're good to go. You get me around 3:30 or 4, my brain just naturally is kind of slowing down a little bit. So someone like me, I would love to work in office 8 to 3, 8 to 4, or even 8 to 2 and then home. Some people want to be there all the time, but it just can't be one way or the other. And I think that if employees can back up productivity and they want to work from home and that truly does work and they can back it up, then great. But to think that one side or the other, you're just going to tick off both sides, right? So nothing will come bad from talking about this issue, right? Talking it out and figuring it out. But both sides have to give a little bit. And I do think that the idea that one side doesn't have to lose for the other side to win is probably a great way to look at it.
That's great. If you can move from arguing against each other to getting on the same side of the table, looking together at the situation, like how are we gonna figure this out? I think that's that. If we can move to that and have the discussions on it, where one side, where it's not unilateral for one side, which sometimes people that are not either not strong negotiators or immature in their emotional in their EQ, they will try to think of like, for me to win, you must lose, and they're facing each other in that. If instead get both on the same side of the table and look at the problem together, that opens up so many more opportunities that you won't think of if you're only thinking of I must win.
And you take a look at like my business in human resources, right? There are conversations that need to be had that are in person, right? That it does help to be in the room, to have the one-on-one, to have that human connection. If we're solving a big challenge that the workforce is going through, hey, let's get in a room, got the whiteboard going, right? And let's solve this thing. That's going to be so much more productive than you and I sitting on a computer screen. Now, what doesn't make any sense is for folks to commute to an office, have all that stress of the time and things like that, to go sit in Zoom meetings all day, right? That doesn't make any sense. And I think when employees, especially this next generation that's coming in, see that's where the frustration goes, because it just doesn't make sense. There's a lot of stuff in our country right now where it's you believe one thing or you believe the next, and people have a really hard time seeing someone from somebody else's lens, right? Point of view. And if you can at least avoid some of those things that make zero sense, like those commuting for Zoom meetings, and saying, hey, getting in a room with us as a group and talking this thing out and having those live in the moments where we're seeing the spark on your face, or, oh, I got something to say. You have to see value in that, or at least let's educate on why we think there's value there. And at the end of the day, hopefully both sides will learn a little bit about the other and go, you know what? I see why that issue is frustrating. Oh, I see why we really should be in the room together.
There's a lot of, from what I've seen in as a corporate leader, there's a lot of benefits for other people to have you in the office. So you might think like, I can work fine from home. Let's say you're a senior individual contributor, I can work fine from home, but that's not optimal for the people that you're mentoring. That's not optimal for the people on your team necessarily. So bringing this concept of what's good for the holistic group as opposed to what's good for me or just what's good for you, I think it can open up some interesting opportunities for optimization at a more global sense.
And that's a great point you bring up, Matt, for those junior, because part of my job as a leader is to mentor and grow the people on my team, right? So if and when roles are ready to be replaced, that person is ready to step up into it. Or, hey, maybe my role's ready I'm going to go somewhere and maybe have someone ready teed up for my role. But we've all had those conversations when an employee comes to you and they come in your door and they just kind of pop in and say, can I talk to you for a second? And they have that look on their face. It could be something personal that's going on. It could be a professional frustration. And that human moment, as just a human being, as well as a leader, that's really hard for them to have that when we're sitting speaking kind of like we are today. Those, hey, do you got a moment? Pop in the doorway type things. I just need to vent. I just need to do this. You can't put a price on how valuable that is.
Right. And the spontaneity of it is sometimes, at least for me, I found to be very valuable. You see somebody in the hall like, let me tell you what just happened,
Mhm.
or do you have a second? It's like, if you can do something like, do you have a second? Can I talk for like 15 seconds, about something, as opposed to like, well, let's schedule a meeting and let's see. Oh, let me get my calendar. I don't have anything available today, or I don't. Well, it looks like I'm backed up until 8 p.m. or and
Right.
then you're booked tomorrow. Basically this 15-second quick conversation, a 30-second conversation could be, doesn't get scheduled for 3 days, and then it's usually overcome by events.
Right. Right. And also think about Matt, when you and I were working together, there were so many times where we would see each other doing something in the moment, and you and I would both help each other. It's like, hey, let me take that let me help you with that. Let me figure that out for you and get back to you. And you and I did that for each other. You did that for me multiple times. And we wouldn't know, I wouldn't have known that was going on with you if we were just, had our cameras on for a meeting.
Right. And a meeting scheduled 4 days from now.
Exactly. When we could have easily solved it just like that.
Stay with us. We'll be right back to thrive and achieve. But first, have you signed up for the Anti-Preneur Insider? This valuable resource provides one actionable tip on how to thrive in your career and one on how to achieve financial success. And it's free. There is so much noise out there today that it's really hard to see the signal in it. That's what the Anti-Preneur Insider does. It cuts through the noise to provide you the focused information that you need in a quick and entertaining email. Get it delivered to your inbox every Monday. Just sign up at antipreneur.com. That's anti-preneur, ANTI-PRENEUR.com.
Industry trends for HR professionals. Where's the industry going, and then how is that going to affect the employees?
I think it's all about managing the expectations of the upcoming workforce, right? I think for a while it was millennials this and millennials that, and hey, you know what? Millennials are in their 40s and have kids in high school, right? The expectations of Gen Z in the workforce, and then even more so when Gen Alpha really starts getting in there is well too, is that's when we go back to talking about both sides listening to each other, right? And understanding and trying to see it from a different point of view. That's going to be key. Gen Z has no problem storming into someone's office and telling them exactly why they think something is wrong or dumb, right? Where I'm Gen X, and I would never do that, right? Um, and it's just how folks were brought up. They are very confident in advocating for themselves, which is great. But there is a little bit of that I expect to win mentality. And regardless of leaders' personal opinions on that, we're going to have to flex to manage that population because that's going to be our workforce. So we do have to be open to some creativity and flexibility and things that, we might not think never work, right? Well, let's try it. Let's pilot a program. How can we manage this workforce in a way that they feel fulfilled, right? They want their work to be meaningful, but at the same time, we still hit our numbers for the board meeting, right? Um, and they want training and they want opportunities. And part of that is going to be, hey, we'll give you that. I'm all for training. Let's do it. But sometimes the opportunity, your next opportunity might be at another company, right? It might be a competitor. And we're going to have to be okay with that if that's what's best for that individual, right? But I think, the days of the fill out the form performance management template is gone, right? Constant feedback is going to be the key with measurable goals, because they're going to say, hey, look, you said for me to do X, Y, and Z here, and I have done this. So now what's going on, right? But the day, of this check the box performance management 3% raise, that's not going to fly with these folks. They need constant feedback, constant management, and they need to know kind of where their career is headed. And I don't think that's a bad thing, nor do I think advocating for yourself is a bad thing. I think that's great. We just have to manage expectations, right? I do a we never did it at Spartan, but I have a template, a training I do called PI. It's performance, excuse me, image and exposure. And it talks about your career growth and things like that. And it's great for Gen Z because so many times, and I've had this conversation with employees before, people will come to my office and they'll say, "Hey, I'm doing great at my job. I deserve a raise." Now, if I'm feeling good, if I'm in a good mood that day, I'll be like, "Hey, well, let's talk about this a little bit, blah, 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 blah." There are times in my career where I've had to take a breath before I responded, because what I want to say is, I pay you your salary to do a good job. That's the minimum, right? So we do this pie training because they tend to think performance, I do a good job, equals more money, more title, more stuff. And performance is is not tied to career growth. Performance is tied to career growth, but not to the extent as another one is. Image is the same way. I think the days of wearing a suit and tie to the office, no one wants to do that anymore, right? But if you're going to wear a hoodie or you're going to wear a hat to the office, make sure it's a championship hat, or make sure your hoodie just didn't come out of your laundry basket, right? You can still look nice, you can still look put together, but the main thing that applies to career growth and progression is exposure. It's exposure to people, and it's exposure to projects. And it's doing that and teaching this generational workforce that's what it is yes, performance matters, but hey, why don't you go over here and work with Dr. Matt on this project and get involved in his world. That's what's really going to drive your career growth. And I tell folks, I'm like, think of it like hockey. If there's any hockey fans watching, and when you're playing hockey, you don't go where the puck currently is, you go where it's going. That's where you want to go. And that exposure to people and projects, that's where the puck is going to be headed for your career. And it's those opportunities that you might think, oh, now this is so much more work. But 10 years from now, exposure to those people and those projects are going to get you to where you want to be for your career.
That's great advice. I'm meeting with a publisher later today, actually, to talk about, potentially working on selling to them my next book, which is called Unstick Your Career. And it is really, really exciting. There's several things that the book goes over, but basically it's pulled from my years and years of experience of seeing people and helping to counsel them through different things, like, why am I not get promoting? Why is this happening? But I see a lot of some errors in that are on the person's side, right? Sometimes it's the system. The system is slow. The system is lethargic. That you have to be creative in it. But another thing is, like, you may not be humble enough. I'm a big fan of the fact that your humility must always be greater than your ability.
Yep, that's a great
And
quote, right?
Thank you.
That's
You
great.
can quote me on that.
There you go.
Another one is that your value. You people a lot of times will be thinking about, I worked all weekend. I worked late at night. And really, those are the things that, of course, value to them, right? Their time and their time away from their families, their time away from Xbox or whatever. But those really don't show up in any sort of corporate metrics, right? In no way, in any of the board meetings I've ever been in, on any of the companies I've been on the board for, we never say, like, well, I know your sales are up and so forth, but really, how many hours is Bill working? Because that's really the metric I want to zero in on. Did Bill work last week? No one freaking cares about that. You need to put things in perspective of the attributes and the aspects that the company cares about. So frame things in terms of, like, I did this that allowed us to save this money or make this money. Those are the two things that ultimately come back at the end of the day. The benefit is, like, I either saved money or I made money.
Yep.
And then the third aspect, so humility, value, and the third is attitude. And that is so, so important. If you come in with an entitled sense, you will be shooting yourself in the foot in terms of your ability to move forward, even if you think that you need to do that to help plead your case. Anytime that people come in with an attitude that is not, everything I do is for the good of the group, whether the team or the division or the company. When you deviate from that, that's usually you will be stunting your growth.
100%. And I learned that lesson a long time ago. I remember when I was growing up, it'd be the weekend and, we'd have chores, right? I'd be playing with my Star Wars toys. I'd be having a great day and my dad would grab me and it'd be time to, clean out the garage or do this or do the yard work. And, no matter what was going to happen that day, Matt, I was going to clean the garage or I was going to do the yard work. But if I had a good attitude about it, that day sure went a lot easier and went by a lot quicker than if I stayed there and, had a, bad attitude and sourpuss face and, complaining the whole time. Funnily enough, when I didn't have the good attitude, the garage then became the garage and the lawn and then your room else, right? But if I had a good attitude about it, and we all have our moments, like with something, oh, do I want to work the weekend? No. Ugh. Do I understand why I'm being asked to? Hopefully, yes. And then I also hopefully understand why it's important. And also, we're probably not working every weekend. Most nights we're probably going home on time. And in reality, hopefully you're working for a company where that crunch time where it's because things fell behind, that isn't the norm. So is it that big of, when you sit down and look at it, is it really that big of an ask? Probably not. You can always control how you react to something, right? And I've just found out that if I'm doing something that I might not want to do, the worse my attitude is, the worse the task is.
I did some research. If you smile while you're doing something, you will be more productive. And there's been some studies that have done that, but just smiling while you're doing it, you will be more productive. I wrote a LinkedIn post several weeks back on that, and it did really, really well because it's just such simple advice, but it's so effective. Just smile.
Just smile. And also you think about, let's go back to our mentoring conversation, our mentoring comments a few moments ago, excuse me. You're walking down the hallway, you're ticked off about something. If you've got this, someone on your team might need you, but if you've got this look on your face, they're going to be, oh, I can't talk to Trav right now. He's in a bad mood. Stay away from him. I don't want people to feel that way about me. I don't want my team to feel that way about me. So even if I'm having a hard time, at least just put that face on, right? Because number one, like you said, you're going to feel better, but I would hate for people to not to need me for something and feel that I was unapproachable. I would hate for that to happen.
That's so generous. Okay, let's switch gears for a second. I want to talk about workplaces. What's the best example you've seen of a workplace culture that really empowered people? And what made that work? What's some good examples there?
So when I worked at Turner Entertainment, it was back when Turner was really into original programming. I'll tell a quick story here. There was a show that was launching that no one who's going to be watching this will remember. It was called Monday Mornings, and it was a medical drama that premiered after the Super Bowl on Monday night. So we have Monday mornings premiering on Monday night, on a night where most folks probably are going to bed early after a long Super Bowl Sunday. And it tanked on arrival, but it had the pedigree of a hit show. It had David E. Kelley was producing. It had Ving Rhames. It had A-list stars, and everyone the next day was like, "How did this happen? What happened? How did this show tank? This thing, on paper, it was supposed to be a hit." And the president at the time is named Steve Koonin. He's now the president of the Atlanta Hawks. Was like, "What are we talking about here? What happened? How did we allow this to happen?" And what ended up happening was we rolled out an accountability session, an accountability training. And what we found in the organization was that people didn't feel accountable to the business and accountable to the product, right? They felt like, hey, I'm in finance. I really shouldn't talk about this. But this is a true example. Someone in finance was a TV buff, and that's why they worked at Turner. They're like, medical dramas only work if they're like whodunit based, mystery based, like that show House that was on Dr. House, right? Or the opposite of that is Grey's Anatomy, relationship based. Monday mornings were both, and those never work. So basically what we did at the organization was that no matter where you worked, what role you had, you were accountable to the product. If you worked in finance and you had a great idea about a show or a concern, raise your hand, and you have the ability to bring it to the table, have the opinion, and have a say, regardless of whether that's your department or not. What we had before then, unbeknownst to the president, Steve, was that people were afraid to raise their hand, right? They were afraid to raise their hand and have an opinion. And they felt like, well, I'm just responsible for this. And how I applied that later in life was when I got out of entertainment and into startup. In startup, you don't have all the multiple departments. It really is. Part of this training talks about see a need and fill it, right? See it, own it, solve it, do it. And in startup, that's the mentality you have to have. It's not, that's not my job. But at a large organization like Turner, it had become siloed where people didn't feel like they could be accountable to something that wasn't in their area, right? So what we did is this training that we taught them when we used the language, the example I just gave with the see it, own it, solve it, do it. And the quote was that Steve thanked me, and it was that you fundamentally changed the culture of our company because we incorporated this theory of accountability and ownership and the see it, own it, solve it, do it. Right. And people were like, hey, you know what? I'm the receptionist, but I've got something that I think is wrong. I want to bring this up to the right person so that it might be their job to do it, but I'm going to let them know about it in case they don't know about it. And that really helped the company to thrive.
That's great, and that's very much along the lines of some concepts that are brought about in Hastings' book, the CEO of Netflix, the No Rules Rules. Very, very similar ideas there on everyone's empowered to speak up, and it's not just okay for you to. You have an obligation to do
That's
that.
right there. You have an obligation to, regardless of your role.
I wonder if some of that comes from in larger corporations where there's historically lots of inertia, that you will not get in trouble for staying within your lane, right?
Right.
Whereas in a startup, you will get in trouble because the company will go under if you don't fill in the white space, see a need, fill it. So it's basically what gets incentivized. I think there's a lot to that. No one, like, what was no one ever lost their job for hiring IBM or something like that back in the day. No one's going to get in trouble for staying in your swim lane.
Yeah.
But as a startup, you absolutely can't do that because there's not enough swim lanes because you're having to deal with like cash flow and runway and so forth.
And a lot of times too in startup, right, from a financial perspective, you are incentivized with most of employees in startups have stock options, right? So you are incentivized to care enough to hopefully make that be worth something. So that's why you're going to do all those things. And Netflix is a great example of that. But they also in their culture deck, they pay well above the norm because that's the expectation. So we're going to compensate you for this, but do know our expectations are here. Where companies run into problems is when they have their expectations here, but they're knowingly paying under market wages, right? That's where they run into issues. So if you're going to have those expectations, it's got to be fair for the employees too. Incentivize them to care that much, right? Or else you get this idea that we hear about so much of quiet quitting. Which think about, the lost productivity of someone just sitting there doing the bare minimum.
Or doing 30% of what they could do.
Exactly, right?
So how do we keep great employees engaged?
At the end of the day, you don't want their jobs to cause them unnecessary financial stress. So I want my employees to be well paid. Now, I do not want to be the highest paid shop in town. I don't want to give money away. However, I want to pay them fairly enough. And I'm talking total compensation, right? So salary, benefits, bonus, all that kind of stuff. I want them to be paid well enough that when the LinkedIn recruiter pings them, I'm not looking. No, thank you. Right. I don't want that to be the thing that I knowingly lose an employee for. Now, there's always going to be someone else who will pay you more, but I want people to be so fulfilled in their job or taken care of from a compensation standpoint that I'm not going to lose them for that. If I lose someone because I'm knowingly underpaying them, shame on me, right? If I know that I'm paying them fairly and they go somewhere else, bless them, good for them. I hope it works out for you, right? But I want them to be both financially, and I also want them to know that we care about them and their growth for their career. If that's something they're wanting, do we offer the right training options for them? Great example of this is when I was working at Turner, I was talking to my supervisor that I was living in Atlanta. So you hear a lot about the Civil War in the South and things like that. And I said, I've always kind of enjoyed learning about that. And Tim told me, he goes, well, there's the Gettysburg Leadership Academy. Have you heard of this? And I said, no. And basically you go to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and you're out on the fields and they're showing you the decisions that the generals had to make during the battles of Gettysburg. And then you're applying it to the corporate environment, right? And it was absolutely fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. But my boss just knew that was something that I was interested in. He goes, like, great, here's a development opportunity for you, right? That opportunity meant more to me. Like, look, the 3% raise is what it is. It's great. But knowing that just because this wasn't a planned thing on his point, I just happened to bring it up and he gave me that opportunity. He cared about my development and growth. That was another reason why it would made me want to stay, right? That the company is helping me get to where I want to get for my career. And hopefully that's up that corporate ladder if it works out, right? Or it's to help me get to the next step in my career. And maybe that is somewhere else. And that's what's best for me, my career, my family, whatever. And that's great too, right? And that's great too, is that we care about the entire employee and their over their career life cycle. That's what's going to attract and retain great employees in the future.
Stay with us. We'll be right back to Thrive and Achieve. If you're looking for more information about how to help W-2 employees, check out the Amazon #1 bestseller, Anti-Preneur. It's available on Kindle and now in paperback. Now back to the show.
Do you think that we should talk about money and wealth more in the workplace?
100%, because regardless of whether we think we should or not, it's already happening. Employees are already talking, right? There's a reason why there's sites like Glassdoor that give their reviews of what their salary is and things like that. So at Turner, we had an open compensation model with terms of salary grades. People could come to my office at any time and say, hey, Trav, I'm making X amount of dollars. Why am I making that? And I would sit there and show them, okay, here's your range, here's your grade. We paid at a 70% comp ratio at Turner, which meant 70% of your total comp was based on your salary. And when we rolled that program out, we looked at the organization and everyone who was above that threshold stayed where they were. We didn't lower because, that's a great morale hit, right? But anyone who was below it got a raise to the 70% mark. For some people, it was significant. For some people, it was $200. For some people, it was thousands, right? But I could speak to them and show them, no, I am paying you fairly. Here's where you are. Here's what it's going to take to get to the next level. But everyone is at this 70%, and we don't bring anyone in lower than that. And I would show them, like I had my salary surveys. We'd get in my office and I'd open the binder at the time and we would talk about it. It was an open concept because we know employees talk about their salary anyway.
I guess I'm thinking beyond that, beyond the salary aspect. What if we talked more about, and this is one of the things that I'm pretty fired up about, is the fact that we spend so much time at work and we take care of so many different aspects of our employees' health and their employees' wellness. Everything from, do you have a best friend at work to help minimize the chance of suicide, to healthy food, to gyms on site, to I've been in places that have wellness activities and meditation sessions even, but we don't talk about creating wealth. We talk about, we sometimes talk about salaries, but we don't really talk about how to create wealth. As I look at the $7 trillion shortfall we have in retirement savings in the country today, that we've got to do something.
Matt, it's such a great point you bring up because part of the human resources world, we're tasked with doing a bunch of lunch and learns always and training opportunities, right? All the time, ask for something. And they're if we market it right, they're well attended. The ones that are the best attended and that you can always get done. If you're an HR person out there and you're trying to figure out ways to get people more engaged, your 401k provider would love to come and bring lunch for your employees and talk about not only the 401k service that they offer, but also other financial services and other things that they offer for them. Those sessions, when I have offered those, have always had the best attendance because people are, they're thinking about that. They want to prepare they want to build wealth. You've talked a lot with me, Matt, about, we talked a lot about work-life balance. We talked earlier about going back and forth with that. And I remember one time you said, look, work-life balance is great, but work is also part of life, right? I'm sure you remember that conversation we've had in our conference room, right?
Exactly.
And if we can help people, I think, have work be that part of life that's not necessarily just tied to paying their bills, if we can help them in a way to achieve some financial a safety net, some security, they can really then just enjoy their job, right? And really dig in there and do things. And I have found that, when you roll these programs out, they're well attended. You market them, and these vendors would love to come in. Now you want to have folks who you trust, who's not gonna, sell your, usually it's your 401k vendor. But when you offer these opportunities up to your employees, they tend to really grab onto it. And then if that financial stress isn't at the top of their mind on their biweekly paycheck, right, they can really dig in. And I've always found that making employees feel more comfortable from a financial standpoint, from long-term investments and things like that, will then improve productivity and the health of your company.
Exactly. When employees are under financial stress, we see increases in distraction, absenteeism, and turnover. It's study after study shows that.
And your health benefits go up too, right? You get stress. And people who are stressed out and anxious, they get sick more. 80 a lot. We talked about wellness a second ago, Matt. 80% of your healthcare benefit costs are caused by 20% of your population. So how can you get that 20%? How can you get some of those folks out of that 20%, right? And employees who are stressed out, not focused, like you just said, it impacts performance, right? And anything we can do to make our employees feel more comfortable and secure, that's always going to be a big win for the company.
Absolutely. That my next company, I plan on having sessions where I explain, like, look, I'm not giving you financial advice. There's SEC and FINRA rules against that, but I will give you some education, and I'll tell you what I have done along the way to achieve the wealth that I've created, and you can ask me any questions on it, and I'll tell you, like, there'll be two parts of it. There'll be all the bad decisions I made. That'll take up 80% of the time, and then the good decisions I made, which will be like the remaining 20%. So, but just share that with people, because going beyond, in my opinion, we have to go beyond the 401ks and which are basically a lot of, times just defaulted to like target date mutual funds. Going beyond that to some smarter investments with lower fees that are diversified from the public equities market. I think those are just, if companies did that, I'll bet like the first company that actually leans in hard to that, as long as they pay decently, that's going to be a huge draw for them. It's like, wait a minute, I'm going to go to this company and they're going to teach me how to become wealthy in addition to doing my job, and not just like, well, here, pick 4 or 5 of these mutual funds from this list of 8 and decide the percentage of Roth versus 401k. That's going to be golden.
Yep. And think about it, Matt. They're going to appreciate it, not just for whatever the wealth they can gain, right? What they're going to appreciate is that the company cared enough about them and their families to offer these things to them. They're going to care enough that the CEO is going to spend his time that we're all, every hour costs money. You and I used to talk about, hey, this meeting we just had costs a lot of money, and that you're willing to have this meeting, which costs the company money, which they're not getting work hours out of, to spend time talking about these things. You're going to get such loyalty from these employees because it shows that you care about them and their families and their future. It'll go over like gangbusters.
That was the core concept behind my TED Talk that I did back this last summer. And I could see in the audience that when I was saying that at first, people were like, what is going on here? And then by the end, they were like, you saw them nodding and be like, yes, that's 100%. That's so it really is one of those things that it's so weird. It's so different. But when you think about that why not take care of people's financial health as much as you take care of their BMI? That's it just makes sense.
Well, yeah, for sure. It's like, wow, the company's not making money off this. They're not getting anything out of this. They're doing it because they don't want this stress for their employees. It shows that you care because you're doing something that you don't have to do. You're going above and beyond. And people appreciate that. They appreciate that. And it's those differentiators that we're talking about, the future of the workforce, Matt. It's the differentiators, that's a benefits offering, right? It's benefits offerings just like that when someone's looking, 2 offers being equal in terms of dollars, which one am I going to take, right? And it's those other types of benefits, the non-monetary type rewards that are going to make folks go from one company to instead of the other.
And to basically tell the recruiter on LinkedIn, best of luck, but I'm not interested.
Exactly, right? That they don't go like, because we all have our bad days when it's like, oh, I need a new job, blah, blah, blah. But if you can, life is stressful enough as it is. And if we as employers can do everything we can to at least mitigate some of that stress, hey, appreciate you reaching out. I'm not interested. Click. That, you know, that'll help. That will most definitely help our retention and our HR folks not have to stress out over turnover and CEOs coming and saying, why'd we lose so and so?
Right.
Yeah.
So spot on.
Yep.
Okay. We're gonna have to wrap this up here. Some rapid fire questions. I ask these to everybody that comes on the show. What's one piece of common career or financial advice that you think is completely wrong?
Oh, geez. Okay. Only chasing your passions. Right. Be it professionally or financially. You know what? Sometimes, I'm not going to use the metaphor that my dad uses, but sometimes, things happen and you just got to do it. It doesn't mean you lost. It doesn't mean life's over, but sometimes you just have to do the thing that sucks. And it doesn't mean you lost or it doesn't mean you quit or you're a failure. It just means, hey, this is where life has taken me right now. And I just need to do what I need to do.
Yeah. My career of sleeping in late is really not paying the bills like I was hoping it would. So
Just, paying attention. Like I said earlier, oh, wow, I have this money. I got this bonus, right? I'm going to go spend it on the Expo. I'm going to go spend it on whatever. Or should you go meet with your financial advisor and talk about what you can turn this money into, right? One of my favorite expressions is don't just do something, stand there, which is the opposite of, usually what you hear. It's like,
right.
Don't make rash decisions. Take a moment, breathe before you make a decision, right? And that can be from a career decision. It can be from a financial decision. The shiny is always out there. The shiny is out there in many different ways, but take a moment and breathe before you decide just to go chase shiny.
Excellent advice. Okay, pay it forward. If you could teach every professional just one lesson on money and one on career, what would those be?
They're tied together. Go for what the best opportunity is. Never, ever just take a job for money. The money will get there. If you work hard and you make wise, meaningful, purposeful career decisions, you will get to where you want to go. Every time I've taken a job just for money, it didn't turn out because it was the wrong job for me. If it's strictly about money, you and I have had this discussion before too, Matt. It can't just be about the money. Yes, we have to have it. We need it to pay our bills, but the decision just can't be based on that. It has to be the right person in the right role. And what's really key is at the right time. You might think you're ready for this big job, right? You might think you're ready for the big chair, but in reality, maybe you need one more step before you get there. And delaying that gratification, delaying that salary and that stock and all that stuff, when you get there, you'll stay there, right? But if you get there and you don't succeed and you come back down, it's going to be hard to get there again.
Right. And you'll have a lot of, it will really feed into the imposter syndrome for you and a lot of anxiety and angst and the pain of a setback. And you have to really get yourself in a good, you have to fix your headspace usually when something like that happens.
100%. And you got to have, you have to have mentors and friends who you can go to, who will give you the tough advice or the advice that you most desperately need to hear. If and when I'm going through career issues, as you know, you will always be one of the first people that I reach out to. And because I know you'll tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, you've given us a ton of useful advice and a lot to think about. Everybody who's listening, you need to listen to this probably like 3 or 4 times and take about 20 pages of notes on it, because Travis is he's just like speaking gold right now. So for how to navigate your career, how to navigate finances, how to navigate the workforce, all of that. Travis, how can we get in touch with you?
I'm currently consulting, so I am on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I never say no to conversations. I never say no to, hey, can we, as long as you're not trying to sell me something. So business development executives out there, we're not talking to you. But, people want to talk about career. You never know people in your life who you're going to come across. who have a great influence on you and your career. Matt, your and my relationship was one of those things, right? We worked together for a period of time at Spartan, but I don't see a time in the future of both of our working careers where we're not, checking in on each other and seeing what's going on and using each other for advice and help when we need it. And those relationships are invaluable. So if anyone likes to talk or needs advice or just wants to hit me up, I'm happy to have conversations with folks.
That is fantastic. Travis, our relationship outside of Spartan is now longer than our relationship within Spartan. So
Yep, and isn't that great? And isn't that
yeah,
great? And what's always great. What I've always enjoyed about working with you, Matt, is we have very different stuff. You and I see the world differently, right? But you would think that sometimes it would be you and I, when we first met, you would think that our personalities would have done this, but I feel you and I we balanced each other out so well when we were working together. You helped me make decisions when I was floundering on what I should do or what I shouldn't do. And hopefully I did the same thing with you. And I always value and trust your opinion. And thank you so much. It was very gracious of you to invite me on your podcast. And I had a great time. Thank you so much.
absolutely. And that is it. Another episode of Thrive and Achieve. Travis, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been absolutely fantastic. Like I mentioned before we turned the cameras on, this has been the highlight of my week. Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure. Good to see you, buddy.